the first thing I wanted to ask you was 6 months into Trump 2.0, where do we think this how do we think this multiracial coalition is holding together? And what do we think they are thinking about the president and his policies?
Yeah. So I think it's a tricky question to answer, right?
Yeah.
Because we have in American elections, we just have this moment of truth every 2 or 4 years, and we have the hard data. And I think what makes it a little challenging is that yes, we have polls in the interim, but this realignment has really happened really among the most disengaged voters in
Mm.
the country, which means could be very easily undone. Now, would I say it's being undone in any sense? I actually wouldn't. If you look at the Latino Trump voter, the multiracial Trump voter, and you really study them closely, has their approval of Trump really declined inordinately, right? Not really seeing that yet, but still a lot of game left to play. I also think midterms, right? I mean, in this political climate culture right now, it's not like these voters are engaged in these
Right.
debates, right, that are happening in the off year, right? So, it's I would say, look, when we get closer to the election, I think we certainly have a better sense. But this is not necessarily the voter we're used to tracking in a midterm. It's not the voter we're used to tracking for these special elections that everybody, kind of politicos obsess about. And sometimes I wrote in my book at one point, the only way you know they exist is in actual
On
election
election day.
results. Yep.
Like, literally
And
on
this is
election day.
uniquely true amongst these voters. From the polling evidence we have, though, I don't see a ton. With that said, I think, look, I write I will write in my forthcoming paperback epilogue to Party of the People that look, 2028 really is going to be the moment of truth because you're going
Right.
to have a different Republican candidate. And that's really the opportunity for things to actually change up, right? Is when you get just people reacting to something different and something completely new on the scene.
I think that is really an important point. This idea of the voter who is not as engaged in politics is a voter that is not typically active in a midterm election or a special election. I think that's right. And so your point is if we are looking at polling where we see Trump's overall approval rating with Latino voters or younger voters, and we say, oh, well, it's lower now, his approval rating, than his 2024 showing, that's not necessarily telling us all that much about whether this coalition that he put together in 2024 is fraying because we don't, those voters who are in that sample are probably the kind of people that show up in every election, not the kind of voters who are more disengaged. Is that fair to say? That we're not
Yeah,
necessarily polling the very people. It's hard to poll the very people who make up this
yeah,
coalition.
yeah. I agree. And there's a real question, right? I think the challenge for Republicans is going to be is that voter going to show up? How do you
Right.
make that voter show up? Particularly your specific half of segment of that electorate. How do you make them show up in an environment where midterms are really determined a lot by turnout? You're going to have more college educated voters in a midterm. You're going to have more high propensity voters in a midterm. You're going to have older voters. All areas where Democrats should be doing better, right, than they are. But that said, they do seem to have, and if you just look purely at the averages, not just speculating, they do seem to have a generic ballot lead, but it's much lower than it was in 2005. It's much lower than it was in 2017. I think we're seeing kind of this question develop of is now different? Because I think it's pretty clear from Trump's approval, right? While it has declined since the inauguration, right? It's a question of has there been any kind of a break or true break
Right.
in his support, like we saw with Joe Biden, like we saw with, voters who had just decided he's too old, he shouldn't run again. Many people in his coalition had decided that, and that was really tough. Versus Trump has so many dimensions to him, right? That so many different ways for people to kind of register approval. That you could say, I don't like this action or that action. I don't like his personality. I don't like his tweets. I don't like this, but I like the policies in general. I like the direction. I like the
Right.
style. I like and I think that there's just so much more dimensionality to Trump in terms of the way people can register approval or disapproval of him, where sometimes one single metric doesn't really capture it as
Mhm.
well as, say, you
Mhm.
just have a more conventional, person in there like Biden was.
Let's talk about Democrats for a minute as well. Eh, Again, looking at these last 6 months, how do you think Democrats have responded to the fact that there has been a realignment and their ability to try to win back some of those voters that they honestly thought were theirs forever?
I think that this is it's the same. I think we're seeing a repeat to some extent of the dynamic that we saw post 2016. Yeah, question of whether it's as politically will be turn out to be as politically successful as it was then. But I really do think the midterms offer in this particular environment where we are realigning really around Republicans are now the low propensity party, Democrats seem to be the high propensity party, which is an absolute flip from where we were in the Obama years. That it's just a fundamentally this is very much, I think, at least in the last couple cycles, has been very much of a presidential cycle problem.
Mm,
So what I would be concerned about if I were Democrat is to say, look, we might do well in the midterms potentially, right? I mean, we might get the bump, right? We might get the reaction, right, that you normally get to an incumbent party in a midterm. But that's not going to tell us very much about where we stand with these low propensity voters who are not really even in the midterm electorate, who will swing back and forth pretty aggressively.
right.
And it didn't tell us much in 2018, right, about the swing among Latinos to Trump in that election. So I think you almost need, I think if you're, particularly on the campaign side, because everybody kind of asked me this question, what's the implication, right, of this coalition for 2026? And I'm like, well, you almost need two different units and two different teams of your party, one that's working on your midterm strategy, one that's working on kind of the long-term state of your coalition and winning the White House. So two can be two very different things.
Nothing's certain in politics, but professionals know one thing. Subscribing to the Cook Political Report is the right decision in every election cycle.
For more than 4 decades, the Cook Political Report has been providing political professionals with the right analysis to help them invest political capital with confidence.
A deep knowledge of the past, combined with a meticulous, unbiased analysis of the present, produces the most accurate predictions of the future, time and time again.
Because it's all backed by data from every input that decides elections for president, Congress, and governorships.
Subscribers to the Cook Political Report get the clarity they need through smart analysis that you won't get anywhere else.
Like the very latest outlook for every race and access to our analysts. Amy Walter, David Wasserman, Carrie Dan, Jessica Taylor, Aaron Covey, and Matthew Klein.
The Cook Political Report offers
The right analysis.
The right analysis.
The right analysis.
The right analysis.
for getting it right.